Look, let's just level with each other. At this point, we've known each other for a long time. We've talked about a lot of things, and some things are going to come up more than once. And I know that at some point we've already talked about the fantastic scene in the greatest animated film of all time, which is The Incredibles, maybe straight up the greatest film of all time. It's in the conversation for me. But we've talked about the scene in the driveway where Bob, Mr. Incredible, feels trapped in his dumb job, not being a superhero, and he's driving home in that tiny car, and he gets out of the car, and he looks over, and there's a kid on the tricycle at the end of the driveway, and he's like, "What are you waiting for?" And the kid's like, "I don't know, something amazing, I guess." And then the analogy for what I want to talk about breaks down, because then Bob's sad. And he's like, "Me too, kid." Likewise, I feel like we get into chapter 15 of Matthew, and we're seeing the same response from a whole bunch of people there implicitly. They're hanging around. They've already seen a bunch of amazing things, miraculous stuff, but they're not leaving. Why not? What are they waiting for? You got your thing. You get gout or a bad back or cancer or some other horrible thing, and Jesus fixed it, healed it, made it so you could talk when you couldn't talk before. Your legs work now. All the miracles are happening. There's been 3 days for all of this to go down, but people don't leave. They don't get their miracle in Matthew 15 and then bail. They just keep hanging out at this Decapolistock spontaneous festival that is cropped up out of nowhere on the east side of the Sea of Galilee in Gentile territory. Well, why? Why are they lingering? Why not bail? I think they're waiting for something even more amazing to happen. I think they're trying to figure out some theology stuff. Maybe they wouldn't call it theology stuff on that side of the lake, but they're trying to figure out, how does he do that? I mean, I couldn't walk a minute ago. Now I can walk. So that's unusual. And it happened when that guy said I was healed. So what does he know that I don't know? What is it that he can do that I can't do? Who is he that I am not and that nobody else is either? I got to hang around, got to find out. So they're waiting for something amazing. And I think the amazing thing that they are waiting for here is not a bigger and better miracle. I think the pregnant question of Matthew chapter 15 is this an anomaly, or is the God of Israel, who in the past sure seemed at times like he might be like the actual God, the one that made all the things and is the first cause and the initiator of existence. I mean, at least a plausible explanation for where all the things came from would seem to be the God of Israel. There's at least some track record there, some stuff there that you could point to and be like, well, yeah, I mean, if it's one of them, I mean, that one seems a lot more credible than what everybody else came up with. And the outsiders are maybe a little more curious, much like the Magi from the East, imagining that maybe there's something a little more special here. But the Jews have always kind of had their own insular thing on the other side of the lake. It's not really for you outsiders. But now here Jesus is, and he's doing all these miracles as recorded in Matthew 15:29 and forward, which goes thusly. Jesus left there and went along the Sea of Galilee. Then he went up on a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing their lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled made well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. That God of Israel phrase there is another cue that we're talking about outsiders to this thing, and that they would view that God as the God of Israel, not their own God. But again, given the history, if I'm those people, I'm waiting for the real payoff, the amazing thing. And the amazing thing would be some kind of indication that this is not anomalaic, but that this is a new set of ground rules. And maybe the God that they've been looking in at from the outside all along is actually for them. I remember when my beloved Denver Broncos traded up to draft Tim Tebow in the 2000 whatever it was NFL draft. And for those of you who are not from around here, don't follow American football, Tim Tebow was a guy who played for the University of Florida, super charismatic guy, very youth group, evangelical, above board, super competitive, nice guy, good guy, wear his heart on his sleeve. And at least in the college ranks, wow, that played out really, really well. And I just remember as a Colorado Buffaloes fan, watching my team utterly fail and just seeing this guy with all this heart in Florida and being like, man, that looks like they're having so much fun down there. Think of this gator chomp thing they do with their arms. We don't have anything, just despair and alcoholism. This is super disappointing. And so I watched that and I thought that'd be really fun if I could root for that. But my heart's taken up. I can't root for a different college football team. And then Denver drafted this guy. And it turns out that he was maybe not the best fit for a long-term NFL offensive career, But man, that little window of time when he played for the Denver Broncos was so much fun. And I was like, I saw this thing from a distance and it looked like it was successful and real. And there was some emotion and pizzazz to it. And now I get to do it for a little while. And this was really cool. And I wonder if that's kind of the same thing that's happening here. The outsiders are looking in at this thing and they're like, it would be amazing if we could, very metaphorically speaking here, don't read into the theology of this, come on now, if we could draft the God of Israel and be on that team for a while, but we probably can't and we're not allowed. And then a miracle that I think is that amazing thing that they were sitting around waiting for, which indicates, no, this was for you all along. And Jesus is confirming miraculously that it is for you now. Jesus called his disciples to him and he said, I have compassion for these people. They've already been with me 3 days. They have nothing to eat. I don't want to send them away hungry or they may collapse on the way. I wonder at this point if there were people in the audience who had done the legwork to figure out the stuff that Jesus had already said. If they were maybe pulling the disciples aside and being like, oh, what's it like hanging out with them? Yeah, like what kind of stuff does he tell you? What have the conversations been like? Well, how does he feel about the crowds? Maybe some of the people in the crowd were waiting to see if he would feel the compassion toward them on the grand scale that he felt for the people on the other side of the lake in Jewish territory. Well, privately to the disciples, Jesus is using the same kind of language as we've discussed, that he's used 3 times by my count, most specifically at the end of chapter 9, when he has compassion on the crowds because they're harassed and helpless. And then at the end of chapter 11, when he's like, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And then in chapter 14, when he's trying to get away and do a little bit of grieving, but an earlier Jewish crowd chases him down for a spontaneous Galilee stock that happened earlier that also has Jesus saying, okay, yeah, I feel compassion for them too, instead of worrying about his own needs. It's almost as though he didn't come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. So same attitude is on display here. And maybe is some people in the crowd who'd heard stories about Galilee stock and the feeding that happened there. Maybe they're watching this little huddle with Jesus and the disciples and they're like, this is the amazing thing. It's shaping up. Is he going to do it? Is this really going to happen? Because guys, I'm telling you, watch this. Kids, I need you to look right down here at what's happening right now. This is big. If he breaks out a whole bunch of food and starts feeding everybody from like 5 lunch boxes and everybody gets to eat, that means we are in. Watch this. And maybe some people are missing it. Maybe some people are catching it. But I tell you who wasn't catching it, the disciples, because their response is, well, where can we get enough bread in this remote place to feed such a crowd? I don't know. You remember like a couple months ago, when one of the most dramatic breaking of the laws of time and space that you guys have ever seen ever just unfolded? So what's going on here? I surely they do remember it. I mean, there's no way that you could have gone up to them and be like, so you guys don't remember that feeding of the 5,000 thing. They'd be like, oh, just so much has happened since then. I mean, now that you bring it up, yeah, vaguely, I guess. No, surely they remember. But what I'm seeing here are people who just can't even fathom the idea that Jesus would provide something like that level of hospitality for outsiders. Now, again, we come back to this rather tedious question that is an important one to wrestle with now, but that was not the question that was in view in the 1st century AD of race. This just wasn't what people were worrying about. The lines were drawn differently. Technology was different. Interaction between different communities was different. It's just completely apples and Velcro. You can't compare the two things. They don't work together. But the Jews absolutely theologically believed that at least for the time being and for all the foreseeable future, they're God's chosen people and they occupy this unique role that outsiders don't get to participate in. They can't, it's unfathomable. And we talked about in the previous passage when looking at Jesus' interaction with the Canaanite woman, the possible interpretation that what Jesus says to her when he remarks, it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs, is Jesus quoting some turn of a phrase or some common expression about the sharing of the religion of the one true God of Israel with outsiders. It could be. There are other interpretations we explored there as well, but the disciples' reaction just a few sentences later gives us the impression that they are still in that mindset and that they're still not thinking outside the boundaries of the Jewish people where Jesus is. That they wanted that lady to go away. Well, whatever Jesus meant by that answer, he certainly didn't mean that he was going to reject that woman and not heal her daughter. Like, he knew dang well what he was going to do, and he followed through, and he did it after an exchange that, for whatever reason, went exactly the way he wanted it to go. We started abruptly a few minutes back, and now we are going to pause abruptly because, as I am wont to do, I have just gone on far too long. So we're going to hit pause here, and next time around, we are going to finish considering whether the amazing thing people were hanging around for has actually transpired here, and then we're going to compare and contrast the accounts of the feeding of the 5,000, the bunch of Jewish people at Decapolistock, with the feeding of the 4,000 with the bunch of Gentiles at Decapolistock. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.